Hello and welcome back to the channel. You're watching Pamashi, and today we'll be going over guided air-to-ground munitions for both fixed-wing and helicopters, and the various guidance types, their pros and cons, and how to use them in battle. We'll also go over a few honorable mentions towards the end that make dumb weapons just a little bit smarter. Let's get started. Alright, first things first, let's make sure we have our controls set up. I'll be showing you how I do it, but use what works for you. I'll be using the names of the keybinds during the tutorial portions instead of my specific keybinds, so there shouldn't be any issues if you already have a preferred setup. That being said, the first thing we're going to take a look at is in settings, air battle settings, and then we're going to scroll all the way down to the bottom, and we want to make sure that we have automatic activation of aircraft weapon selection at mission start set to yes, as well as automatic activation for the bomb release and the CCRP mode. Moving on from there, let's head to the controls. And we're going to do aircraft and helicopter, so it's going to be a bit much, but just hang in there. It's something we got to get through. So the first thing that we're going to look at is we're going to go down to weaponry. And if you have secondary weapon selection enabled, you can actually just set all of these to the same button. If it's not enabled, you'll have to have a different keybind for each. But we need to have fire secondary weapons, drop bomb, fire rocket, fire air-to-ground missile, and drop guided bombs. Moving on from there, we're going to look at the weapon locks. And again, if you have secondary weapon selection enabled, you can have these all as the same thing like I do. But we're going to need weapon lock, air-to-ground, lock guided bombs. And then if you are using secondary weapons selection, you need to have that bound to something handy. Moving on from there, we want to make sure that we have the ripple quantity set. And then we're going to scroll all the way down. See if I can find it. Here it is. Yaw axis for aimed weapons and pitch axis for weapons aiming. These are going to be for the manually guided ones, but we'll get into that later. Let's see, from there, we are going to want, where is it? Here it is. So toggle cannon ballistic computer and toggle rocket ballistic computer. I have these bound to the set thing, so they just flip-flop back and forth when I push the button. Next, we're going to want activate target point and deactivate target point. And then you'll notice I also have sight stabilization and disable sight stabilization bound to the same set of keys because they functionally do the exact same thing. Moving from there, we're going to look at the camera control. At the least, you're going to want external view, targeting optics view, and optical seeker view. Alternatively, you can also just have toggle view, but it's a little bit clunkier and a little bit slower. Moving down from there, the last one that we need to look at is switch NVD mode, and this is going to be for those targeting pods later in the game that have thermals, and which are really handy, so we're going to want to be able to set those up. Let's see, and I think I missed one. Hang on. Let's go back up. Yep, I sure did. So toggle laser designator, you also need to have this bound. Okay, now we're in the helicopter controls. We're going to scroll down, and we are going to need weapon lock air to ground. We're going to need, again, if you're using secondary weapon selection, you're going to need to have that bound as well as the ripple quantity. Moving on from there, we're going to have the laser designator. And then all the way down here, where is it? Here we go. Fire air-to-air missile. After that, we're going to scroll down to the camera controls. We're going to want sight stabilization. You can also bind to disable for some certain uses. And then we're going to want external view and shooter bound. You can also use gunner view. It's functionally the same as the shooter one. Moving down from there, just like the last one, we're going to want switch NVD mode. This is going to be for those targeting pods that have thermals. Okay, now we can take a look at our first guidance method. So before we get into that, I'm actually going to show you how to figure out what the guidance method is for your ordnance. And to do that, we're going to go to modifications, secondary weapons, and then if you just hover over it, it will say, so this one says guidance manual and then in close in parentheses. But if we take a look at, say, the F-16, take a look at its secondary weapons. This is laser guided, this is IR guided, this is laser plus IOG, etc. But that's how we're going to figure out what type of guidance method we have. Okay, now that we have all that out of the way, we can actually get into our first guidance method, which is going to be manual, or MCLOS, which stands for Manual Command Line of Sight. Here we are in the A4E using AGM-12B bullpups to showcase, but anything with the manual guidance type will be the same. For some pros and cons, we'll start with the pros. So obviously it's more precise than dumb rockets, and they're steerable in case you need to switch targets. But for some cons, they are hard to use without a lot of experience and practice using them, and they do require some pretty long attack runs because you have to sit there and steer the missile and can't really maneuver while you're doing so. But getting in to show how they work, let's turn in and start lining up on this SPA right here. Okay, now we're nice and close. We're going to go ahead and nose down, start lining up this shot. Alright, we're going to fire the missile, and using those control axes, we're actually going to move the missile and get it aimed in. Again, they're pretty hard to use, so we have our first miss here. Let's swing around and try it again. Alright, we're going to line it up. Fire, and again, using that control axis, we're just going to guide it in. Alright, and we got it that time. Again, that really just showcases they are quite difficult to use unless you have a lot of experience on them. I obviously don't. I try and stay as far away from these things as I can. But let's go ahead and fire off this last one, and I can show you one more time. Alright, so we're nice and lined up. We're going to go ahead and fire, and one more time using those control axes, which I have set to the number pad. There we go. Alright, now let's move on to TV and IR guidance. The next guidance method we're going to take a look at is TV and IR. They functionally work about the same. We'll be focusing on TV for this demonstration, but missiles like the spikes that have IR guidance will actually work the exact same way. So for some pros, they are really nice with their fire and forget capabilities. You don't have to walk them in, you don't have to steer them, you just lock, drop, and you're done. This can help you with really short engagement windows, because once you get the lock and you drop the weapon or fire the missile, you can turn and start evading any sort of missile or gunfire coming back at you. And they're also good for close and long range using two different methods. For some cons, the pro being that they are fire and forget, that can also be a little bit of a con because you have no intervention post-launch. Once it's on its way, and there's nothing you can do about it. And also, they are defeatable using hard or soft cover and also smoke. And they can sometimes get confused if the enemy is sitting next to like a dead tank or something like that. But taking a look on how to use them, I'm first going to show you the long-range method. We'll be using the AGM-65As, which are the missiles. But let's turn in. Alright, now that we're turned in, we are going to press our optical targeting view button because this doesn't have a targeting pod. Now that we're in that view, you can see that we're actually just aiming straight forward. Let me show you how to fix that. Now, if you look down and use your sight stabilization button, it'll put a little red box right there. And now, we hit the same button again, and we're looking where we want it to point. So we're getting close to this. We're going to push our weapon lock air-to-ground button. Okay, and now it's locked. We're going to go ahead and fire. There it goes. And if this was an actual match, we can turn out, start flaring, start chaffing, start looking for other people. The only caveat of doing it long range like this is it is going to take a couple seconds for it to get there, but we can watch it fly in right here. And there we have it. Alright, now let's take a look at the close method. And just because we have them, let's go ahead and use these GBUs. So I'm going to deactivate the sight stabilization right there. That way we can get just a clean representation of how to do this up close. Alright, so if we zoom in, we can just barely see those tanks. We're going to hit that same weapon lock air-to-ground button. It's going to bring up this little square. Once we have it over the target, we're going to press it again. It's going to find it. We're going to go ahead and drop our bomb. And there it is. So I can show you, just to show that it does work, let's switch back over to those AGM-65s and we'll take out that truck. We'll be using the short-range method again. Alright, so we got weapon lock, air to ground. We're going to try and lock him up. Fire the missile. And there you have it. Alright, so that's how to guide in TV guided weapons. Now let's go take a look at laser. Alright, and rounding it off for fixed wing, we have laser guided bombs, and we'll be using the F-16C to take a look at them. For some pros, laser guided bombs have the most control pre and post launch because they just chase that laser and you can move it as you see fit. They also have an insane standoff distance, so they can keep you safe from a lot of SPA and SAM systems. For cons, usually you can only fire them off one at a time because you have to sit there and babysit the lock-in. They are defeatable through cover and concealment, and some tanks actually receive a laser warning from you lasing them, and that gives them enough warning to get into said cover or concealment. And sometimes you can run into gimbal limit issues with the targeting pod. But to check it out, let's go ahead and actually turn out instead of in and gain a little bit of standoff distance so we can showcase that. Okay, now we're nice and far away. The first thing we're going to want to do is, just like with the TV guided, we're going to enable our sight stabilization. And then because we have a targeting pod, we're going to go into our targeting pod view. This has thermals, so we're going to turn on our NVDs. And the last thing we need to do is enable our laser. So now we have a lock on this guy. We go down using the CCIP. Go ahead and drop that bomb. And now we can go ahead and just climb. We can turn out. But once we have the plane in a nice safe spot, we're going to go back to that targeting pod. And it's usually a good idea to kind of sit here and baby this lock. And with a lot of tanks, what you're actually going to want to do is hit that sight stabilization button one more time. And there we go. Alright, I didn't quite get to finish my first thought, so let's go ahead and drop one more. So again, we're going to use sight stabilization to get it where we want. Targeting pod view. We're going to lock onto it. You can actually hit sight stabilization one more time. Alright, we're going to go ahead and drop. It's a little bit off, but it is a guided weapon after all, so it'll help guide itself in. Now that we have the plane going in a safe direction, we're going to go ahead and just babysit this lock. And there you have it. Okay, that's going to do it for the fixed wing. Now let's hop over to a helicopter and we'll go over the guided methods for that. Okay, moving on to helicopters, the first one we're going to take a look at is semi-automatic, or SACLOS, which stands for Semi-Automatic Command Line of Sight. For pros, well, they're guided at least. For cons, it's really difficult to hit a moving target, especially if they're moving quickly. And also, it takes a lot of practice to get good at steering those missiles. So now that we're up, we're going to go ahead and turn around. We see our target, so we're going to hit our sight stabilization button. And now we go into the shooter view. You can see down there in the bottom, our maximum range is 6,560 feet. We're currently within that, so we should be good. We're going to move the helicopter to where we're inside the launching window, and we're going to fire. Now, there is no locking on with sight stabilization. You just kind of have to guide it in yourself. There we go. Alright, and showcasing it one more time, let's go ahead and cut over. Again, we're going to push our sight stabilization button. We're going to go into shooter view, and we're going to fire. Now with the stationary target, you'll notice it's extremely easy. You just kind of sit there and hold it on there. And there we go. Now, probably the only other thing that I would say about this is doing it this way is probably not going to be the best course of action. It's probably going to be better to just sit on the outskirts of the battlefield, just like right at the maximum range of your missiles, and just kind of pop up above the trees and then back down. But let's see if we can line up just one more really close range shot, which can be a bit difficult, but let's go for it. I'll hold it there, and there we go. Alright, now let's go take a look at laser and beam riding. Okay, and finally we are going to look at laser-guided weapons, but this time being fired from a helicopter. So for pros, it's a lot like the laser-guided bombs. They're precise, they're flexible, and sometimes you can even pull off some helicopter-on-helicopter kills if they're close enough. For cons, again, normally you can really only use them one at a time because you have to sit there and babysit that lock. They're also defeatable using hard and soft cover, and some tanks will get a laser warning which will enable them to find cover and know that something's on their way. But taking a look, we're going to go ahead and take off. We're going to use our sight stabilization button. We're going to then hit our shooter view. And this one in particular has night vision, so we're going to go ahead and do the night vision. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and zoom in, lock on our target, enable our laser, and fire. And it's actually really convenient. You can see that countdown right there that counts down how long you have until it fires. Now, to showcase that it's usually one at a time, but sometimes you can get away with multiple, I will show you right here. So for this first target, we're going to go ahead and fire on him. Right, and right before this one hits, we're going to fire a second one. There's the first one. We can quickly switch to the second one. And that's a quick 2 targets destroyed. It won't work in every situation, but it definitely is possible. Out, we are going to take a look at those honorable mentions, and that is going to be a ballistic computer, CCIP, and CCRP. So to figure out if you have any of those, you actually need to hit X-ray and then hover over the pilot, and then you will see that we have CCIP for cannons, rockets, and bombs. Also for bombs, we have CCRP. And let's get into a test drive, and I'll show you how those actually work. Okay, to round everything out, let's first take a look at the ballistic computer. So if you'll notice, we select our rockets, we have our normal rocket reticule, but if we aim down towards the ground, we actually just get this little reticle, like a little X with a dot in the middle. That just shows you exactly where your rockets are going to end up. If we hit our cannon's ballistic computer button, it's going to switch it, and now we have a little circle with the X in it, and that's where our cannon shot is going to go. So that being said, get turned around here. Let's turn on our rocket's ballistic computer and wait for it to get over this little SPAA. Fire a couple rounds. Oh, and we hit him. Just kill him. There we go. And then again, for the cannons, go over here and hit one of these boats. And there we go. Alright, moving on from there, the next one we have is going to be CCRP, or Constantly Calculated Release Point. If you'll notice, if we switch to bombs, we have a little reticle right there. That's actually CCIP. We're going to go over that next. But there are some planes that have CCRP and no CCIP. use CCRP. We are going to find ourselves a target. Let's go for, let's say, this little truck. So we are going to hover over it with our reticle. We are going to activate target point, and you'll notice the little square is a little bit above. That's all right. That's working as intended. That's how it's supposed to be. All right, now we are going to hold our drop bomb button. And the moment that the CCRP decides it's time to drop, it'll drop the bomb for us. All right, and then we're going to go ahead and deactivate our target point so it doesn't get in the way, and we can show CCIP. Now, CCIP basically turns realistic into arcade as far as the bomb drops go. But we're going to go ahead and line this up. Okay, and we have our little targeting reticle down there. We're just going to line it up. We're going to hit the space bar. And there you go. So that is all the basics you need to know to work the ballistic computer, the CCIP, and the CCRP. Now again, these things aren't guided, but I figured they deserved a spot as an honorable mention because while they aren't guided in themselves, they actually enable you to use some dumb bombs, dumb rockets, and dumb guns just a little bit smarter. And that is going to do it for this video. If you found it useful or learned something new, please consider leaving a like and subscribe so you don't miss anything new. If you have any questions or comments, leave them below, and I'll see you in the next one.